Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight, despite the traffic. We came intentionally to this majestic venue, actually, to celebrate people like Michael Faraday, Andrew and Thomas Mellon, and their forebears, the people of purpose, to deliver the Faraday message. This venue has proudly witnessed so many significant, iconic moments in American history, including the signing of NAFTA and the formation of NATO. Tonight, it also witnesses a truly important moment in Faraday history, the starting point for Faraday Grid's journey into the United States. So if you'll allow me a few minutes, if you would, I'd like to take you on a historical tour around the philosophic origins and the economic impact of our energy system, which also happens to tie Scotland to America. And as you know, we've just spent the last couple of years deep in the middle of the Enlightenment, home of Edinburgh, bringing this to the world. So the founding father, Benjamin Franklin, once said that energy and persistence conquer all things. This quotation seems fitting as we begin our journey into the United States. Franklin's legacy connects both to the man we're named after, Faraday, and the man this stunning venue was named after, Andrew W. Mellon. Tonight, we hope to make Michael very proud. We don't just stand on the ideas of Faraday, we pursue the purpose in a manner which is consistent with his values. Michael Faraday, it seems to me, was an especially American man. Despite being a Scot raised in England, he was the physical embodiment of the Enlightenment. Faraday's life was the singular pursuit of purpose. And Faraday was somebody who deeply admired Benjamin Franklin, so much so that he continued Franklin's groundbreaking studies in electricity and dedicated his life, his very being, to explicating the beauty of everything through rational scientific method. With that idea, he simply sought to increase human happiness, prosperity, and well-being. This exceptional nation, the United States, was in fact created through the genius of Franklin and his fellow founding fathers, and has prospered to this day on ideals that are echoed by Faraday. Everyone has the inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Andrew Mellon was deeply inspired, as I said, as was his father, by Franklin. So while Franklin himself was having that immeasurable impact on Michael Faraday in Great Britain, his influence also extended to a young Scots-Irish immigrant in Western Pennsylvania named Thomas Mellon. At 14, Thomas read the autobiography of Benjamin and became inspired by Franklin's journey. So much so that he would later have a life-size statue erected outside the original Mellon Bank in Pittsburgh. Then in later years, Thomas, with failing eyesight, would pay his heir, Andrew, a quarter an hour to read to him, including the most important ideas of history, the breakthroughs of their days, and the brightest visions for our future. With those readings propelling Andrew's own education, he went on to become one of the giants of banking, venture capital, philanthropy, and politics. He helped literally lift millions of people around the globe from a millennia of overwhelming poverty. And his own influence could not have been more evident, in my view, than his threshold investment in Westinghouse itself. Because it had been in comparable foresight, I think, that Westinghouse had noticed the value in alternating current experiments that had been happening in Europe and had supported William Stanley's invention of the alternating current transformer in 1885, thus igniting the singularly most extraordinary period of innovation. And less than a year later, the installation of the world's first alternating current grid in Great Barrington in Massachusetts. So Mellon's commitment to Westinghouse allowed Westinghouse to change the world, with 28,000 patents introduced throughout the 20th century, the third most of any company. So it was then that Andrew Mellon, who by that stage had become principally a politician, commissioned the Herbert Hill building, which is just around the corner here. And at that time, it's not surprising, at least to me, that became the final home for a quotation from Abraham Lincoln. And that quote was, "The patent system added the fuel of interest to the fire of genius." This location here is for me, quite a contrast to our original headquarters. And that was just only a short decade ago. It was my faraway garage in Melbourne, Australia. And since then, Faraday Grid has gone on to establish one of the world's finest innovation teams in Edinburgh, Scotland, standing on the shoulders of great Scots like Adam Smith, David Hume, James Clerk Maxwell, intellectual giants of the Enlightenment. Because it was Maxwell who went on to mathematise the work of Faraday and make it possible for us to in fact do our work. So Maxwell's almost important to us as Faraday was. And during the last 2 years of our growth, it's been absolutely nothing short of astronomical, and we've grown into a dynamic global business. We're a world-class team, committed to one of the most important tasks, in my opinion, laid bare by rationality and the science of modern times. That is, our understanding that energy-enabled prosperity enriches our lives, liberates us, and enables the pursuit of happiness. Although we've already covered so many miles since Melbourne and to Edinburgh and now on to Washington, D.C., we remain committed to our belief that Faraday Grid enables secure, reliable, clean energy, but most importantly, affordable energy, because poor people simply can't afford clean. And if we want to have a clean future, it also needs to be one we can afford to pursue our dreams with technology empowered by energy. So, ladies and gentlemen, why then is it that Faraday Grid has chosen to be in the United States now? Well, now there are tens of millions of Americans living in states and cities committed to transitioning to 100% clean energy, setting the stage for what a future energy system has to be. Not what it should be, but what it has to be to support those intentions. But how we achieve that is in fact the most difficult question of all. How do you integrate 21st century technologies, 21st century dreams and ambitions when we're still reliant on an electricity architecture which is simply unchanged from William Stanley's 19th century innovation? Without a radical transformation of our energy systems, the low-carbon future that many of us around the world are so committed to and so much desire for our children and grandchildren can simply never be achieved. And this is where Faraday Grid, in my view, comes to enable sustainable prosperity for all Americans. The original electricity grid from the era belonging to Westinghouse, Stanley and Edison unlocked the greatest economic gains in human history. Across the world, the grid has literally lifted billions from grinding poverty. However, that grid, the greatest engineering triumph of the 20th century, is simply no longer fit for purpose. It's no longer fit for our evolving future. And the hub and spoke grid as it was is rigid, passive, one-way delivery system, prioritising system stability before and above all else. That's an essential truth. It has to. Historically, electrons and the inertial contribution essential for that system stability were provided as a bundle, right, by large thermal generators at the centre of that system. However, it is now that our values have changed for what an energy system should deliver. And it's fundamentally changed, and it fundamentally changes the challenge that we face today. The electricity system is now suffering, and as a consequence is failing in places all around the world, including Australia, where in the last couple of years the electricity system's failed 5 times as a direct consequence of these challenges. Every day, week and month, we encounter sobering economic and environmental analysis that shows the historic electricity grid simply cannot cope, cannot resolve its new and expanding challenges. So recent Nobel laureate Bill Nordhaus found that the cost of limiting the increase of average global temperatures to just 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit is $37 trillion US. That's a staggering 50% of GDP. A recent peer review into the feasibility of 100% renewable energy soberingly concluded that an immediate and complete reinvention of the entire electricity system, supply and demand, would would be required, right? So what we've got is global distributed energy resources anticipated to increase by 400% during the next decade, driven not only by states like California, New York, and as of last week, New Mexico, but also cities like Atlanta, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Salt Lake City, and Washington, D.C. here, right? So all of which are now committed themselves totally to 100% renewables. And as was reported this week, a centralised rigid grid system simply cannot manage this. It would be like having one single control room for the entirety of the internet. To be blunt, pushing hard for carbon reductions, renewables and electrification of vehicle fleet before addressing the energy technology deficit, and there is fundamentally a deficit, right, is exceedingly dangerous and frankly imprudent road to take. So today we're at a historic junction point. The decision we make right now about the future of energy could lock us into pathways for centuries to come, just as the choice of the AC grid has locked us into a particular pathway for more than 138 years.